Hello, everyone. I am here to break down a little bit of the San Francisco 49ers versus Minnesota Viking game that the Vikings happened to win 24-16. Now, Garoppolo went 15 of 33, 261 yards, 7.9 yards average per attempt, one touchdown, three interceptions, and he was sacked three times for 24 yards. His QBR was 10.6 and a rating of 45.1. So, Garoppolo obviously didn't lose a game till today, and I think that was inevitable of him losing a game, but it was just a pretty bad day. It was a pretty tough matchup for Garoppolo today, and I do think there is something there, even though he seemed to struggle quite mightily today. And rushing, it was a little bit of a bold position to keep running up the middle on Linval Joseph and Sheldon Richardson, but they had varying success doing it. Some runs were working so well. There were a lot of runs where they weren't working so well. And Matt Breida ended up with 11 carries for 46 yards, a 4.2 average. Alfred Morris, 12 carries, 38 yards, 3.2 average. Garoppolo, 2 carries, 6 yards. So, and in total, 25 carries for 90 yards, a 3.6 average for the team. And that's pretty much on par with what they were doing last year. And so it's really not too shocking to see those numbers what they are. Now, receiving, they had George Kittle, who was a big problem for us today, and he had 5 catches for 90 yards on his 9 targets. Dante Pettis, 2 catches, 61 yards, and a touchdown on 5 targets, but that one touchdown is one of those things where I was talking about with Garoppolo. Like, it is definitely there, the talent. That touchdown, you saw it on that, because, you had somewhat of a broken play where the pocket just collapsed and he spun out, went over to, rolling to his left, he put it in a spot where only Pettis could get it, and those are the kind of signs you look for. And this team is good, but not great right now. And I think within, maybe 2-3 years, we're talking about a pretty legit contender in the Niners. They're just not there yet. They are ascending, so they're coming up, just not quite there yet, but they will get there. And Juszczyk, he did have 1 catch for 56 yards on 2 targets. Trent Taylor, 4 catches for 28 yards. Garcon only caught 2 of his 6 targets for 21 yards. And Breida also added in a catch for 5 yards. So they were 5 of 13 on third down, so 38%, and 1 of 4 in the red zone, which is 25%. They also had 4 turnovers, which is more than this defense is used to getting, and they held the ball for 28 minutes and 51 seconds. Now, Minnesota, they had Kirk Cousins this game, which was the debut of a one Kirk Cousins, the $84 million man. And he was 20 of 36 for 244 yards, a 6.8 average, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He was sacked 3 times. He was pressured a lot more than 3 times. He had a QBR of 58.6 and a rating of 95.1. Now, rushing, there wasn't much room to run today for the Minnesota Vikings. And Latavius Murray, he had the highest yardage total with 11 carries and 42 yards, a 3.8 yards average per carry. Now, Cook, 16 carries for 40 yards and a 2.5 yards per carry average. Cousins also carried the ball 4 times for 26 yards, and Diggs also got in there a little bit with his 1 carry for 8. Now, that equals to 32 carries for 116 yards and a 3.6 yards per carry. Now, that's a little disappointing because you kind of had that last year. Like, they were 7th in the league in rushing last year, averaging, I think, 122 yards a game, but they were way down there in terms of yards per carry at 3.9. So it's not like they were overly efficient at running the ball. They just ran the ball a lot more than other people. Because, if you look at even back over to the Niners and what they got, 25 carries, 3.6 yards per carry, 90 yards. We have 116 yards, but we're averaging the same thing. So we just ran it more, which is kind of what we saw last year, and that's a little disappointing. Now, to be fair, Elfline's not in there, but and receiving though, we had a pretty decent day receiving with Thielen. He caught 6 of his 12 targets for 102 yards. Cook was 6 of 7 with 55 yards, and one of them was kind of a failed screen towards the end of the half. Diggs, 3 of 6, 43 yards, and that touchdown, which was of a great throw, which I think that's one of the reasons why they brought Kirk Cousins in. That was one of the throws that you kind of looked at that like, Case can't make that. And that's why they brought him in instead of Case Keenum. I know some people wanted Case Keenum. I do think this move at least made sense. Whether or not you agree with it or not is debatable, but I think it at least made sense. But carrying on, a little off topic there. Treadwell was 2 of 4 for 18 yards. Rudolph, 1 of 2 targets today. It's a lot less targets than we're used to seeing with Kyle Rudolph. He had 11 yards and also a touchdown. Conklin had pitched in for 1 catch for 6 yards. And they were 7 of 17 on third down, which is 41%, which is not bad, but not great. 1 of 2 in the red zone, 50%. Also not bad, but not great. They did turn the ball over once because Dalvin Cook fumbled the ball one time. And they held the ball for 31 minutes and 9 seconds. Now, we're out of the numbers. So, I thought Kirk had a very solid day. It was a very solid debut. Although I will say, no more head-first diving. I think a lot of Viking fans, like myself, had a little bit of relief when he got up. And because we're one of those hits away from seeing Trevor Siemian start games. And that's not really what we want to be seeing. And the O-line, I think, needs to improve quite drastically, specifically Tom Compton. I think we saw today why Tom Compton's the backup. He should stay the backup forever. And I think we're really missing Pat Elflein because I think we might be able to put Brett Jones in over at left guard. Because I think Tom Compton single-handedly, well, maybe not single-handedly, but he was mostly the problem today. There was a lot of inside pressure. DeForest Buckner had 3 sacks all year last year. On Tom Compton, he got 3 sacks today. So, and I know for all the 49er people that will look at this video, I know Buckner's not a bad player. He's a very disruptive player. But the sack production that he got all of last year was gotten on 1 guard. That's not good. And I think it's mostly just Tom Compton that's the problem. And I know Brett Jones is mainly a pass blocker, but at least when Elflein comes back, we have a blocker there at left guard, potentially, instead of a whatever you want to consider Compton. And I do think it's going to be hard to establish an effective running game, but they really do need to figure out a way to generate an effective running game. Because I don't think 40 yards from Dalvin Cook is going to do it. Like, I know he also added 55 yards in on the receiving, but I do think you need a more steady rushing game here. You can't be getting 40 yards from Murray and Cook, even though that's 80 yards. I get that, and that's still not good. I don't think that's still not that great, especially considering how many times they carried the ball, because it's really not the best. And it's going to be a little bit hard to get that going with some of the linemen they have in. But on the bright side, they can swing it out a little bit. And maybe we can get some tosses in there to get that going, perhaps. And I know Rudolph wasn't heavily involved. I think that's okay. And some people might disagree. But I feel like the less Kyle Rudolph has the ball in his hands, the more effective he can be used. because what he is he's almost useless in between the 20s. Outside of sometimes he'll get vertical and he'll make a pretty good catch in traffic down the field. Now, if he's getting a lot of catches, say dump off catches on third down, you're probably not getting the first down. So him not being totally involved until the red zone, I'm perfectly fine with as long as we're giving the ball to Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs. If they're touching the ball more, I'm okay with Rudolph touching it much less. Now, defensively, Sheldon Richardson is such an improvement over Tom Johnson, and that was evident today. Like, both him and Danielle Hunter were just so disruptive. It completely killed a lot of the passing game for Jimmy Garoppolo and the Niners. They did get more turnovers than normal, and they had 4. They're not usually used to getting all these turnovers. And I do think they let some players get behind them. Luckily, some of these were dropped. A few times you saw it was George Kittle did it a few times, and Juszczyk really got behind him on that one play. But at the same time, Kittle also dropped a different pass that he did get behind him, and you saw some of these things. So it's a little concerning. And speaking of concerning, Trey Waynes got hurt a little bit, and you already are down Mackenzie Alexander. So they experimented with some Holton Hill, and that they didn't like that, so they put Hughes back outside, and then they used Jaron Kearse in the nickel, who actually didn't play horribly. I'm just a little surprised that we saw a 3-safety set, and it wasn't George Iloka. It was Jaron Kearse, which that's a little interesting. And I do think Hughes had a pretty good debut. I think sometimes he did make... He got beat a few times, but that will happen as a corner. He had the pick 6, although I think that was more of an errant throw due to pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo. But overall, it was a pretty good debut, and I'd be pretty shocked to see Mackenzie Alexander get that job back when he's healthy. And he's going to be tremendous depth when he gets back, especially if Trey Waynes is, out a little longer. And as an overall note, I think you did see a lot of sloppiness that came with week 1. I don't know if this is how both teams will play throughout the whole year, but I do know this offensive line needs to improve a lot. And I'm kind of hoping with Brett Jones only getting here like 10 days ago that maybe that will be improving. And we don't know when we're getting Pat Elflein back. So I imagine when Elflein comes back, we're going to see Brett Jones move from center to left guard. So those are my notes so far. And a little side note, I guess. Carlson made all the kicks. It's good in Minnesota, making all the kicks. Anyway, I bid y'all adieu till next time.